Our webinar on FDI and investment promotion in Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, it's my pleasure to host this exceptional panel of thought leadership from multiple multilateral organizations. We are going to jump right into the presentations as we've packed quite a bit of content into our time here today. The run of show will begin with Anna Novick, who is the head of the investment division of the Directorate for Financial Enterprise Affairs at the OECD. Anna Novick is the head of the investment division of the Directorate for Financial and Enterprise Affairs, supports the director in DAF's contribution to the strategic orientations of the Secretary General with a focus on improving the international investment climate, promoting good domestic policies to support investment and responsible business conduct. She establishes strategies for the OECD to secure a leadership role in the international investment debate and to advance a more structured economic analysis of investment flows and impact. She has also contributed to OECD-wide initiatives, including horizontal work streams on competitive neutrality, global value chains, and OECD contributions to the G20. Prior to joining the OECD, Ms. Novick was the Ambassador Director of Multilateral Economic Affairs and the Economics Directorate of Chile's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade from 2011 to 2014. I'm now going to pass it off to Anna. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Anna, you're on mute.
Yeah, Anna, you're mute.
Okay, now, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, good. Now, yes. Okay, sorry, I was just saying good morning and good afternoon, and I was just saying that it's a pleasure to be in this webinar with my colleague from the World Bank, the IDB, the International Economic Development Center, with my friend Bojwan from WAIPA. I would say that it's when you invite me to this webinar, I said it's refreshing to meet and discuss issues that are different to the COVID and discuss more about investment promotion agencies, trends, and what we are doing as an international organization. But on the other hand, I said we need to contextualize the discussion. For this reason, allow me to do a very, very brief couple of slides that I present a little the FDI trends and some long-term perspective to contextualize better our discussion after. Let's start with FDI trends. At the time that the pandemic hit, FDI flows have been trending down for more than 3 years, 4 years even, because I think 2015. We will have by October data for the first half of 2020, but we have preliminary information and there will be large drop in FDI flows, particularly equity inflows in the first semester. We gathered some additional information from firm data information, and what you can see here in the graph of the left is a collapse of new completed merger and acquisition deals in middle income countries in the first 3 quarters of 2020. Trends in developed countries are not in this graph, but follow the same patterns. And it's interesting to see that the collapse in upper middle income countries on merger and acquisition deals is bigger than the one that was in the 2008 crisis. fewer completed merger and acquisition deals during the crisis could mean more deals during the recovery, because some of these deals are not necessarily stopped, but are on hold. However, if the economy does not recover, it's likely that companies will begin to abandon some of these deals. On the other side, in the right side, you can see data on greenfield FDI that tends to play a relatively important role in developing economies. And here we also see a decline in new project announcement over January to May 2020 by 20% in OECD countries and 50% in developing countries. At the OECD, we did some kind of projection. We know that the future of FDI flows will depend on the success of the public health, particular vaccination and availability of the vaccines, but also economic support policies that have been taken. Under the optimistic scenario in which these policies are very effective, the economic resume growth in the second half of 2020. Under a middle scenario in which these policies are partially effective, the economic recovery is uneven, and under the pessimistic scenario, they are ineffective, leading to a lingering recession. We forecast that under the optimistic scenario, FDI flows fall 30 to 40% in 2020 before some recovering by the end of 2021. However, we will review these trends by October, and with the preliminary information that we have, we can affirm that the optimistic scenario will not happen. We will probably be in the middle or pessimistic scenario. The middle scenario means that FDI flows fall 35 to 45 in 2020 before recovery somehow, but remain about 1/3 below pre-crisis level. Earning in some sectors recover, but not in others. Equity capital flows are subdued as more announced merger and acquisition that were on hold will not happen, and greenfield projects also, some of them are abandoned. Under the pessimistic scenario, FDI flows drop by more than 40% in 2020 and remain flat. Many of the merger and acquisition and projects that are on hold will not happen, and divestment by struggling firm increase, including more liquidation. Of course, this analysis of different scenarios will impact different sectors and countries and regions. What we can see in the medium long term is of course, the economic reality will change. The future is very uncertain. We don't have this ball to say what will happen, but there are two issues that I want to call your attention, because COVID-19 will impact different FDI depending on the motivation also of FDI, in addition to the different countries and sectors. One is that it's clear that some sectors, for example, ICT sectors, knowledge-seeking FDI, may prove buoyant in the longer run. But others, like energy, the one that are resource-seeking FDI, or services sector like tourism and transport, will really could have a longer impact if the recovery is not soon. Another, and the last point that I want to do to contextualize this, the more economic situation is the global value chain. We all know that these are changing, and this will impact the efficiency-seeking FDI. Disruption due to the coronavirus may lead some more multinationals to rethink their geographic and sectoral spread, and other multinationals may wish to diversify their suppliers and locate them in a regional set. With that, let me go that at the OECD, we deal with different communities. Investment policymakers, for example, we deal with investment treaty policymakers, with FDA statisticians, with central bank that are related with capital flows, national security experts in charge of FDI screening, and investment promotion agencies. In the context of the COVID-19, we produce different policy notes that I have the links over there that I will let to you if you want to go in, an organized webinar. One of these policy notes and one of this webinar was about what was with the promotion agencies in time of COVID. And I will tell you why why we decided to focus on investment facilitation and promotion, in particular investment promotion agencies. We have been working on these topics on investment facilitation and promotion for many years, but working directly with IPAs started just in 2016. Why? Because in our experience doing investment policy review, IPAs are an important part in the implementation of investment policy reform. Second, because they are close to business and government, and therefore they play an important role in facilitating investment. Third, IPAs do not substitute sound investment policy, but they are really part of the good investment climate. In this interaction with IPAs, we realized that there are different institutional and operational solutions, but they can learn from each other. And there was not enough knowledge or information that they can, they could need. That means that we decided to do something else here. In this context, in 2016, we started inviting OECD and LAC investment promotion agencies to the OECD. We started with a member of the investment committee that includes 7 Latin American countries: Chile, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Costa Rica, Colombia, and Mexico. And with the aim of facilitating the peer learning, we started to conduct some analytical work in the area of investment promotion. The main objective of the IPA network are to gather this community of practitioners, to peer learn among them, to benefit from the OECD expertise, because it's not just the investment expertise, but it's also other environmental, tax, different expertise, and to engage with policymakers and IPAs from other regions. The network is chaired by Jeroen Nichland, that's from the Netherlands, and operate under the investment committee from the OECD. One of the first work that we partnered with the IDB was to build a survey and then to mapping IPAs. We did a LAC investment mapping, we did an OECD mapping, and then we continue doing a MENA IPA. Today in the morning, we launched the mapping of the Eurasia IPAs, and this kind of mapping provide a good, good information, background information to have a more detailed discussion among IPAs. What they have, this mapping, they have the survey that is the base of the mapping, have 5 different areas: organization and resources, functions and activities, including mandate, prioritization strategies, monitoring and evaluation, and coordination and cooperation. In this coordination and cooperation, we include interagencies with region, with stakeholders, external offices, etc. I will not present the result of these mappings, but allow me to present examples of some of the findings. One important finding is not only that creation of IPAs has increased in the last 30 years, but also the number of organizational reforms. And this is something that we can observe in all the region that we have been mapping. It is clear that IPAs are agencies that need to transform and adjust to the changing reality. Most of you are familiar with these 4 core functions of the IPAs within their mandate, and in the mapping, we categorize them depending on their focus regarding this function. That means that some of them more image building, some of them more focus on investment generation, investment facilitation and retention, and policy advocacy. This is the interesting information that you get when you have different mapping from different regions. For example, we can observe how the bulk of resources of IPAs are allocated to investment generation. An important part of the resources is allocated on image building in MENA and Eurasia, but with a little less degree in LAC, but not in OECD countries. On the other hand, investment facilitation and rotation is the second most important function in OECD countries, but less important in terms of resource allocation in other regions. In terms of mandate, there are large variation across IPAs, also across regions, having on average OECD IPAs less number of mandate and MENA countries more number of them. In terms of the kind of mandate, all IPAs has the attraction of foreign inward investment as the main mandate, but combined with different other mandates. OECD IPAs generally combine FDI attraction with trade, innovation, and regional development mandate. For the LAC region, we launched last year in 2019 with IDB in Buenos Aires this report that map LAC IPAs in this 5 areas that I mentioned above. But it goes beyond with some performance analysis. I'm not so sure, Jaime, but maybe he will present or make some reference to this report. I would just like to introduce some basic elements that you will find here. As I presented at the beginning, IPAs continually reform, and like IPAs are not an exception. In this context, it's important to know who they are, how they are organized their operation, what they do, mandate activities, and how they do it. And for example, you can see in this slide, how in red is the IPAs in Latin America, and in black is OECD, how when you measure targeting intensity, IPAs strategies in target different among agencies. Some prioritize or exclude sectors, countries, or projects, and some choose different combinations. But on average, OECD IPAs are more targeted intensive than their like countries. The same when we want, and as I told you, you can observe that in this slide, another example of how this report goes a little beyond of just mapping. The report asks if IPA makes a difference, and this focus on the existence of IPAs overseas and how having an office in a country is association with large inward FDI. What else we are doing at the OECD? We produce thematic policy notes that help IPA delegates to have focused discussion on specific topics that are relevant for them. We have produced in the policy advocacy and also monitoring and assessing the IPA's performance. And then we are constructing also making other regional policy notes right now. What else? And this is the last slide that I want to mention to you is that we organize annually IPA network. What is important, and this is something that I want to transmit to all of you because we will discuss about what different organizations are doing. In this annual meeting, we try to provide different settings. We always organize one network that is an open session that we try to invite different stakeholders, different regions, different policymakers, business, and different to discuss issues that are relevant for this community, but also relevant to other communities. For example, we have one about IPAs and sustainability impact, IPAs and facilitation, and then we do breakout session. And sometimes the breakout session, for example, what is monitoring and evaluation, we put OECD agencies and then some of the LAC agencies together. When we do policy advocacy, we can learn from many countries that do a lot of good policy advocacy, but we do this breakout session that focus more on the necessities and the peer learning needs. On the 20th of October, we will have our open session on the impact of COVID, but looking more in a more strategic and lesson learned. And of course, you are all invited to this event on October 20. That's my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that panoramic view through the lens of the OECD. Now we'll begin with the 4 presentations that are prepared for you today. Our following presenter is Jaime Granados. Jaime Granados is Trade and Investment Division Chief in the Inter-American Development Bank. In this capacity, Jaime supervises the formulation, execution, and evaluation of financial and non-financial trade and investment support operations and provides technical advice to governments and other stakeholders on issues of trade, investment, and integration. He was also adjunct professor of a course on trade and integration in the Americas at Georgetown University Law Center. Before joining the bank in 1998, Jaime was Director General for International Trade Negotiations at the Ministry of Foreign Trade of Costa Rica. He holds a Master of Science in Public Policy from Oxford University, an LLM in International Trade Law from the University of Georgia, and a law degree from the University of Costa Rica. He has published extensively on issues of trade and integration. His last co-edited book focused on free and export processing zones in Latin America and the Caribbean. Zonas francas, comercio y desarrollo en América Latina y el Caribe, análisis crítico de sus oportunidades y desafíos. Please welcome the next speaker, Jaime Granados.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? We are going to use, thank you. Yes, I can see. We're going to have the PowerPoint operated by our colleagues over there. So we're going to put it in the screen. Thank you very much. All right. So we're ready. Thank you. Yes, we've been working very, very intensely on the issues of investment and the role of Latin America in this new paradigm. I mean, there are a lot of buzzwords right now regarding attraction of investment and the opportunities. Please, let's go back to the previous slide. Thank you, yes. And the opportunities that this implies for Latin America and the Caribbean countries. In addition to the work that we've been doing with the OECD that Anna just mentioned a few minutes ago, we've been engaged in many, many other fronts at the operational end, at the knowledge end, in terms of providing technical assistance. We're going to address that, and we're going to talk about that in the context of a post-COVID digital era, which is, perhaps the most important area of interest right now. Next slide, please. We're going to address the following issues: how we support IPAs, context and opportunity, the challenges, how should IPAs prepare? That's perhaps the most important question right now. And what is the IDB doing in 2020? Okay, next slide, so that we can begin. Definitely, from the point of view of the bank, we are a full range financial services agency in terms of supporting the IPAs. Our view is essentially to provide strategic updating, institutional upgrading, and digital transformation to IPAs in the entire spectrum of areas, usually executed by IPAs, capacity building from the institutional point of view, core promotion and facilitation programs, human talent for FDI and the generation reskilling, upskilling, digital language and other abilities. We also do a lot of IPAs evaluation. In fact, one of the main products that we're going to present this year will be precisely focused on an evaluation of 14 IPAs that we are just about to launch. And we are also engaged in regional and business fora. We provide financial support and technical support to Red Ibero, the network of IPAs in Latin America. We help Brazil organize the Business Forum, the Caribbean, and we have so many other dimensions of help to IPAs in Latin America. And we do this via our usual instruments, our financial instruments, that is loans, technical cooperation projects, knowledge projects, other corporate projects, and other networking projects that we have and which have been very successful, in fact, in the last few years. And we have now empirical evidence to that effect that we can share. Please, next slide, please. This is a sample of some of the projects that we have in the area of supporting IPAs. As you can see, we have with a lot of countries here in Latin America and the Caribbean. We've been working on many, many issues. Perhaps one of the most innovative right now would be the investment digital single window. That is sort of a spin-off of the trade single window. The conception of having one single digital platform at which investors come once and in a digital fashion, so that they can process all their requests, licenses, registrations, permits, etc., in one single portal so that they don't have to go around presenting different copies everywhere. Everything is digital. So we are working with several countries, as you can see in this slide, and we can provide you with more information on that innovative product, because from the innovation point of view, it is perhaps the most important product that we have right now under execution. In particular, we have single window digital investment projects in Costa Rica, in Ecuador, in Colombia, in Suriname, and we look forward to discussing other opportunities of this nature with other countries. In the rest of the countries in this sample, we are engaged in the other more specific areas related to investment promotion, capacity building, etc. And the important thing is that we have very, very interesting results in the projects that we have already wrapped up. We see that, for instance, in Guatemala, we were able during the last year to attract about $1,100 million in fresh FDI. In Uruguay, also in a talent development program, we were able to, only during the last year, to generate more than 2,500 new employment opportunities, and in fact, employment. So our projects tend to be rigorous in its design so that they can at the end show important impact. Next slide, please. Now, let's look at the context and the opportunity. The hype, as you already know, is COVID, and the fact that COVID is accelerating an already existing trend, reshoring and nearshoring. This is very coincidental with this globalization trend that we have been observing in the last 10 years, and it has to do with several factors, such as wages are rising in China, and therefore previously offshore activities may consider returning to some of the original countries, to the capital export countries. There are emerging technologies and robotics that are inducing many of the previously offshore activities to come back to the original country, where there's more technology, more digital capacities, and therefore more abilities to handle and to harness the opportunities of new technologies. But there's also, as everybody knows in this room, that there are very complex now trade and tax policies in large countries that are inducing many companies to return to the original countries. And so therefore, in order to comply with those policies and avoid increased costs, many companies are returning to the original country or are locating nearby the original country. And finally, as we already know, COVID-19 is a major factor in the reconfiguration of global value chains, and it has a disrupting effect, and therefore this new environment is inducing many companies to evaluate how they position themselves in the global markets. In some countries and in some sectors, this new risk competitiveness paradigm is now as important as, and sometimes even more than, the traditional, cost competitive paradigm. And that's something that we have to take into account. Next slide, please. Thank you. Given these realities, broadly speaking, we see three major scenarios here. The first one would be the fact that production that had been previously offshore now comes to the original country. That's reshoring. And over there, only indirectly, Latin America and the Caribbean may get some benefits, but it's not perhaps the most important opportunity. The important opportunities would lie when production of previously offshore inputs now near shores. That is, comes 1 or 2 time zones away from the original company, and implies basically a regionalization of supply chains. Now, the third option would be the enlargement and diversification of the suppliers base of major multinational companies in developed countries. And these two last scenarios would be the ones that imply an important opportunity for Latin America. And we're going to look at that more in detail in the next slides, please. This is just an example of potential nearshoring opportunities in Mesoamerica, Central America, Mexico, and the Dominican Republic. It is here just for illustrative purposes. This is a very casual methodology by which we compared the participation of China in global markets vis-a-vis the participation of Central America, and therefore indicating some broad general light opportunities that Latin Americans may have. The larger the circle here, the clearer the opportunity is. This is just an example of the kind of analysis that can be taken into account, but my point will be after this presentation that we have to complement this kind of analysis with more optimized targeting lead generation frameworks and methodologies, and that's what I'm going to explore within the next few minutes. Please, next slide. Everybody knows, and we read the newspapers and we read the specialized media, and there's a general sense that perhaps the real opportunities in the short term are more obvious in the medical devices sector, pharma, PPEs, telemedicine, knowledge-based services, e-commerce, logistics. You know, this in general, these sectors, and the OECD, Anna just mentioned them a few minutes ago. This is relatively obvious, and everybody is focusing on this. But there are more opportunities that we need to explore. Please, next slide. We have to take into account where we come from and how Latin America was positioned in the more general world global value chains scenario. And we know for a fact that the participation of Latin America has been relatively limited because of several factors. I mean, and there are differences in the importance of these factors in Latin America, but overall we can pretty much indicate that there has been restricted trade and tax policies. There has been high logistic and transportation costs, and we have generated a lot of analysis in that regard. It's everything in our website. We know that wages are traditionally higher in Latin America than in Asia, or they have been in the last decades. Now this is changing. We know that Latin America in general, and with a few exceptions here and there, it's mostly focused on commodity exports. There are issues of distance, there are issues of low industrialization, and this implies that Latin America may have only a limited presence in global value chains. And this is a problem because nearshoring would be possible and more likely where there is industrial density. Next slide, please. We have here a mapping of the multinational enterprises and vertical subsidiaries, and we can see that that density is precisely based in Europe, in the US, in Asia, and both Latin America and the Caribbean and Africa are a little behind. The fact that we lack that industrial density is precisely one of the factors. The fact that we lack economies of agglomeration, we may only start now in developing cutting-edge technologies, and we are now starting to improve the competitive business environment are problems that we have to engage on, and that's one of the fundamentals that we have to take into account. And therefore, nearshoring may not be massive and obvious for Latin America. Mostly taking into account that there's a very strong competition all around the world, and we have seen in Asia, for instance, the formation and the Japanese leadership of important initiatives towards integrating among several countries, Australia in particular, but they also try to bring India into the game, so that to have a stronger global value chain platforms and take advantage of these opportunities. However, there are very important assets in Latin America that we have to take into account. A very important trade agreements platform, North-South, with Europe, with North America, etc. We are abundant on labor, land, nature, other factors. Institutions and stability, political stability is in many of the most attractive countries. We have an established business base, of course. We are not new to this, and there's already the presence of many businesses here in Latin America. That's very obvious. And we have favorable time zones vis-a-vis large markets, in particular the North American market. So there are assets here that we need to explore. Next slide, please. However, we have to take into account that corporate decision-making to relocate is complex, and there are many factors to take into account. Every industry is different. Geography plays an important role here, and very often there's an assessment of what is the logistic, the costs, the regulatory frameworks, the trade facilitating initiatives, what are the trade agreements and the rules of origin, whether we allow for accumulation, what are the relative costs, the incentives, the tax agreements, the price elasticity of the demand, the availability of talent, and this is absolutely fundamental, and in general, the regulation and the environmental regulation and the political risk in a given country. Next slide. In addition to that, I should say that there are still a lot of questions which are open and we do not really fully understand business realities. Which are the sectors that are going to be more subject to nearshoring or reshoring? Is a shorter global value chain a better answer? What are the options and how do they play out? Whether we try to increase resilience of the global value chains or robustness of the global value chain. This is pretty much to tell you that industrial strategies, firm strategies vary by sector, by firm, by product, by target market, by day of the week, by the mood of the CEO, etc. You know, there are very, very often strong variations in sectors, in products, in countries, etc. So the key point here is that firms are better at determining the level of risk they can take, and therefore the firm and being able to reach firms is precisely the key of the game in this, in order to reap the opportunities of the new environment. Next, please. So there is a unique opportunity for Latin America, in fact, but the question is, how do we capture? How do we go about? How can APIs help in this very, very challenging position, particularly right now, when we know that several APIs are already moving, several countries are already moving, several ministers they understand these opportunities and they are trying to work it out in order to prepare plans, action plans, strategies in order to try to capture the opportunity that this implies. Let's see how we can go about this business. Next slide, please. In general, one of the first guidance is that the fact that we should never forget the fundamentals. In fact, there's not much difference between the kind of investment attraction that we have to do now and the one that we had been doing in the last 20, 30 years. It's very important to keep an eye on the usual suspect and the usual factors, you know, at national and subnational level. The business climate, the legal framework, talent is absolutely essential. The digital readiness is particularly urgent right now. The logistic costs, the existence of cluster initiatives, and the availability of the appropriate infrastructure, industrial parks, etc. And this is new. At a regional level, I should mention, and this is very important for us, that in order to be able to offer an interesting proposal to multinational enterprises, we also have to work at the regional level in issues regarding the convergence of trade agreements, which have created a very complex spaghetti bowl with rules of origin that are very different, which do not allow accumulation, and therefore the linkages are fragmented, and it's preventing Latin America to fully realizing the potential of global value chains. This is very important. The availability of trade facilitation and origin accumulation initiatives is important. The availability of integrated regional digital markets, now it's part of the big ideas that have to be in front of us, and we have to be working and thinking about integrated regional digital markets from now onwards. Next slide. But perhaps the most urgent matter right now is the fact that IPA should upgrade service. And this is what perhaps the most important point here in this discussion. The obvious point is the fact that they have to strengthen aftercare service, but also we have to work, and we've been working with some agencies regarding labor intermediation now that during these difficult times in which there has been a lot of layoffs in some industries. Well, let's help them locate where it's mostly needed, but we have to fine tune the analytical, the digital skills. We have to upgrade the information systems, the user experience, so as to make it more attractive to prospective investors. We have to work on digital single window for FDI. And of course, this implies at the end of the day, revisiting very urgently the strategy and the sector priorities and the country offer in general. One of the key points that I want to stress here that in order to move around those lines, we have to increase our ability to provide analysis. And there are two types of analysis, what I call the top-down analysis and the bottom-up analysis. The top-down analysis will be the one that deals with, for instance, global value chain studies, substituting US imports from China to see where Latin America and the Caribbean fits, or explore, reveal comparative advantages, and all of this is fine. All of this will give you potential sectors and products that you can explore. But, and this is our innovation, and this is one of the issues that we want to discuss with you this year, is that we have to explore bottom-up analysis. That is, we have to explore new digital products using machine learning, using new technologies that will give you potential firms highly likely to invest, so that you do not bypass the top-down analysis, but you complement it with very, very important tools in this regard. And that's what I put 3 stars next to this particular analysis, because we believe that it's important, and this is where the IDB now is innovating, as I'm going to mention in the next slide. Please, next slide. And this is one of the last. We are working with what we call quantitative intelligence, which is basically an evidence-based customizable tool for FDI attraction. This is basically the use of the wealth of micro firm level data available to the agencies via not only the CRMs, via international databases that are available in the market, via the knowledge that the IPAs, sophisticated IPAs have right now. And we are applying supervised machine learning techniques on this data so as to identify multinational firms that are more likely to establish an affiliate in a given territory, whether national or subnational. This will allow the rigorous built-in impact evaluation of the implied promotion agency and favors cross-fertilization across agencies, promotion, and intelligence department, and institutional learning. This is a tool that we want to demonstrate this year, not now, but this year, and we will be calling a specialized seminar in order to evaluate, to see the results of our first evaluation in the applications of these tools. Next, please. Because at the end of the day, again, the name of the game here is to fine-tune and to optimize the lead generation targeting so that IPAs can make a more strategic, more cost-effective and efficient way of reaching potential investors. I'm going to move around this slide quickly because I'm running out of time. Please, next slide. I'm going to show you what the IDB is cooking in 2020, because in addition to the 2019 product with the OECD, and in addition to the array of loans and technical cooperation programs that we have right now and that are under execution, specifically for 2020, we have here a list of our products. We have preparing an evaluation, a publication on evaluation, impact evaluation of 12 Latin American Caribbean IPAs. So look forward for our announcement. We are preparing a policy research project specifically on the quantitative intelligence research that we are doing with CINDE, by the way, and we have all other knowledge output products that we are preparing on specific global value chains, telemedicine, textiles, services, knowledge-based services, etc. So look forward to those products in the upcoming weeks. We have a community practice for IPAs executing IDB operations, focusing specifically on digital products. And we have soon the results of a poll on the use of digital tools by IPAs and a toolkit on social media for IPAs. So look forward to these new products. Also, we have launched this year a series of 2 online free courses on investment attraction. I will send you, the link is in the next slide. We have also work on national and subnational IPAs, and finally policy advice that we are providing on aftercare, impact evaluation, and institutional strengthening to selected IPAs. Next slide, please. And that one will be the last one. The main takeaways for this 15-20-minute presentation are we are trying to better understand the width and the depth of the current reconfiguration of global value chains. And to that, we coincide fully with the OECD. But there seems to be an opportunity for Latin America and the Caribbean to bask on nearshoring opportunities. This seems rather obvious right now. However, APA should consider the strategic updating, the institutional upgrading, and the digital transformation that we are offering via our projects. The key here is to optimize targeting in terms of lead generation with the firms-based FDI attraction tool. The IDB, of course, is here to assist you. Thank you very much. In the last slide, I offer you the link to the free online courses on IPAs and innovative digital tools that are open for everybody. They are in English, they are free. So we invite you to participate in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jaime. And just so everyone knows, all of the links that are in the presentations, we will be sending out to everyone who is registered after the event has closed. Our next speaker is Armando Helbron. Armando Helbron leads investment promotion with the World Bank Group, developing related knowledge and supporting lending and advisory projects to help countries attract, retain, and expand FDI across the world. He has 33 years of global experience in international business, investment promotion, private sector development, and special economic zones, working with development organizations, private sector associations, governments, multinationals, and SMEs. As part of this, he led investment promotion at Costa Rican CINDE when strategizing and attracting flagship investments, such as Intel, Ospira, Abbott, and Procter & Gamble, thus creating the country's most dynamic clusters still today. Since then, has advised multiple investment promotion agencies around the globe. He is a Fulbright Scholar with a master's degree in international business from the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome, Armando, from World Bank Group.
Thank you very much, Emily. Good morning, good afternoon, dear friends and colleagues. It's great for me to be here, being part of this webinar and listening to distinguished panelists as well. So I couldn't agree more. These knowledge sharing activities are more needed than ever. Let me share my screen and, okay, so somebody needs to stop sharing their screen so that I can share mine. Okay, sharing now. I hope you can see my screen here. So I'm going to be sharing findings from our global research at the World Bank Group. And I have a special feature here because we'll summarize a report called The State of Investment Promotion Agencies with evidence from our joint global survey of national IPAs from every continent. And that would be exploring the characteristics of IPAs, but also their challenges. And this has been a great collaboration with WAIPA and the World Bank Group, represented here by Bastian and myself. I hope this is moving. Okay, this is what I plan to present in the next 18 minutes. So let me first introduce the World Bank Group's framework for effective investment promotion. This is based on our field experience across the world of over 30-something years. And it's the backbone of the report that I've been talking about that WAIPA and the World Bank Group issued recently. It has 3 pillars for IPAs to produce development impact. The first one, strategic alignment and focus. And this is about sharpening via corporate or strategic plans and sector prioritization, your entire focus of the agency, your core of the agency. So this ties in nicely with what we have heard from Ana and Jaime before. Second thing is the coherent institutional framework for FDI. And this is not only strengthening the institutional core of the IPA, but also the relationships with the key partners around The third one has to do with strong service delivery. And Jaime already started to mention that. I think it's very, very important that IPAs more than ever focus on improving their service delivery to investors. Of course, this is with investor orientation. So you need to be customer driven. In this case, the investor is the customer, but also a level of granularity like never before in terms of what needs to be delivered to investors. And that's across what we call the Comprehensive Investor Services Framework, or CISF, which I will explain in corresponding section. Going one by one, the first pillar, strategic alignment and focus. By now, most IPAs have a strategy, 70%, and they're influenced, thank goodness, by SDGs at the moment. However, okay, let me see what happened here. I'm sorry, I'm having some little issue here. Okay, so however, you see that the focus is still not, it's a little bit loose with 11 priority sectors on average. 70% of the IPAs have more than 8 priority sectors. And you can see how renewable energy and agriculture and pharmaceutical, medical, they're being more and more added by agencies around the world. So this is no longer a single or a very particular segment for IPAs to focus. You need to be digging further. Second pillar is about institutions. And in this context, we have the good news that IPAs have been increasing in the level of autonomy. So some level of autonomy is there nowadays, which comes in very handy in the context of COVID and changing conditions and needing to adapt. So agility is key, and this autonomy allows some agencies that have it to adapt better to the changing conditions. But this, there's a struggle, and nowadays there is a lot more mandate crunch. Almost 70% of agencies have 6 or more mandates, and Anna alluded to this, whereby foreign investment promotion or promotion of investment in general is the #1 mandate, but you have a lot of other mandates stacking up. And this is unfortunate for developing countries. As you can see in this graph, we have that developed nations have IPAs that are a lot more focused in terms of the mandates as well. And developing world has the downtrend here that unfortunately correlates negatively with FDI results. So the more mandates you have, the more you can handle, and thus FDI attraction suffers. Over time, we have seen staffing of the agencies grow, which is great, but this is at the bigger agency level. So with the other mandates that I was talking about, still 38 staff within the agency are the ones focused on investment promotion, and of which 13 are focused on FDI. So you see there's fewer people still dealing with investment promotion. The good news is that there is a better gender balance. It's still, especially in investment promotion, 50-50 balance, which is fantastic. Congratulations to all of the agencies of the world working on this. The other interesting thing is that over time, we have seen how the background of the staff has improved. And I think it's because of many multinationals, the multinationals actually asking for this expertise of sector expertise, but also the multilaterals coming in and advising agencies to improve the staffing qualifications. And in this particular context, also foreign languages have come important over time. However, private sector experience is still lacking. Third, investor services. So in this context, you have that the World Bank decided to go a lot more granular. So let me explain more specifically what this comprehensive investor services framework is. You have here at the at the top, the stages of the life cycle: attraction, entry and establishment, retention and expansion, leakages and spillovers. And then 4 categories or types of services, including marketing, information assistance, and advocacy. There may be some overlaps there, but mostly what we're trying to bring to the table is a level of granularity, because facilitation become a word that doesn't mean much anymore. And so in that context, you need to be thinking about specific items, like a menu in a restaurant. So you would have a lot more granularity there. And what we have been seeing again this year, because we have done this research in the past and we can compare, we have seen that agencies still are front-loaded. They are mostly providing marketing services at attractions. So these are the typical seminars, conferences, and some missions to target markets to speak to target investors. That's right on. This is what agencies should be doing. Also providing information once the investor has made a decision. Most agencies around the world, or about 70%, are providing this level of information at entry. However, who is taking care of the investor in the other spots, and or especially afterwards? And this is especially important now in times of COVID. I think agencies should be more comprehensive in the way they provide services across the investment life cycle. And I'm going to show you some statistics from the investors themselves. And for instance, providing information and hands-on support to existing investors and advocating for reforms so that the investment ecosystem they live in can improve in that location. So let me share some research from the World Bank Group talking to investors, as we always do this. It's actually very important if you're dealing with a customer to learn from the customer what they really believe. So we do a lot of research there, mostly for internal purposes when we work with clients, and some of these we publish. So these are all internal and some are published. In this particular case, let me share something from our recent Global Investment Competitiveness Report. This is the second edition. This is the 2019-2020. And again, we have noticed how investors value IPA services of this type. Are you providing this type? Efforts to improve business environment in the country. Is your IPA providing this? The other very important is assisting in the setting up, assistant, hand-holding. And I think the virtual or digital single windows come in very handy, because this is part of it. And this is where the trend is, and we are fully endorsing that approach that Jaime just disclosed in the previous presentation. But also operational issues and grievances. So the agencies need to be more front and center, dealing with the investor, what many call aftercare, so that they can detect if there's issues and come to the rescue, especially before things escalate to a point in which the investor divests or even take the country to courts. This is important because we know from another piece of the research that investors value very much political and macroeconomic stability and the legal and regulatory environment. Right now, this is extremely fuzzy, as you would know. So investors are experiencing very high levels of uncertainty. Another piece of research, which is from our investor poll survey, very fresh from the ovens and still not disclosed to everybody, but I'm sharing with you today, is that we know this has had a universal impact on companies in general, but multinational enterprises are also feeling the pain. 80% income drop of about 40% on average. And we all know investment has come down. So I have a recent piece of information from another source that is telling me that every segment is down. It's in red still today in terms of any kind of activity there. Investment is down. Perhaps data centers, some BPOs or knowledge process is coming up to vogue, but overall is negative. This is basically having or forcing companies to rethink and re-strategize about their supply chains. And Jaime already alluded to that. The first thing we see is almost 60% of the companies turning to digital technologies to manage their supply chains. The second thing we see here is the diversification. So to improve that resilience, you need to bring in other suppliers. So 37% of companies already doing this, but as well production sites. So they may have now another production site. And this is where Latin America may come in handy, because the last point I wanted to make here is we started to see 14% of the companies already looking at nearshoring or reshoring. So this brings some data to what already was introduced by Jaime before. Another piece of data, fresh from the oven, and of course, using our subscription to FDI markets, I need to disclose that the trend has been quite negative. So you see from the moment we learn about COVID in the world, but also in Latin America, investment project announcements have dramatically come down to 70% negative. And that was in May, but then 50% negative still today or the latest numbers that we have from July. Some better light, we also have these trade analytics at the World Bank Group. Of course, you would understand that we're very closely monitoring global value chains and trade. And what we know is that, of course, a big drop, we all know about that, but there's some light at the end of the tunnel. It looks like container capacity, it's been brought back to levels of August. Okay, and in this context, we need to reinvent ourselves. So I think this is also playing to the words of previous presenters. The way we recommend our clients to work on this is across the 3 pillars. So it's obvious, sharpen your strategic focus. You cannot be promoting 11 sectors. And if those sectors are agribusiness, imagine how many segments would there be. So you need to really focus, especially look at what's going on, what the dynamic segments are showing, and then re-strategize there around that. So confirm those or take out the ones that are no longer vital to your strategy. Develop compelling value proposition. So even a good value proposition from the past is no longer cutting it. So strategic location, forget about it. Lower cost, no. You need to bring in the fuller package, and also building on what Jaime presented. You need to consider all these other aspects of what investors consider their ecosystem, what is vital for them to survive and thrive in your location. Second thing, stronger institutional core needs to be there. And this, as I mentioned, has to do with the IPA, but also with the ecosystem of the IPA, so other organizations, autonomy, agility, proactivity, shed some mandates are tangential, bring in private sector experience or more private sector experience if you don't have that. Some agencies are fully private sector backgrounds, but this is still not the case in many other countries. Reallocate resources. Most agencies are having some budget cuts, but you're not traveling, you're not spending in the most expensive of the activities. Reallocate those resources to the emerging priorities, including better services to investors. And of course, leverage technology. Absolutely, yes, this is the time to do it. And this is the time that actually investors are more willing to be into the virtual mode for even site visits. Third, definitely strengthen investor service beyond the attraction that you've been accustomed to. So you need to listen to investors. You need to dig in this research that many of us are producing and learn about pains and gains at the micro level, but also macro. Bring the top and down, as Jaime was mentioning. Adjust your offering. Provide relevant services to these specific investors that you want to target, and across the investment life cycle, as I mentioned. So how do you tackle this? Of course, now there's the emergency. There's 2 stages. Crisis response. So you need to listen. We published some notes about how to do this. But to summarize this, the daily updates and relevant information on what's going on in your location, hands-on assistance to sort out the issues that investors are facing right now, advocate on their behalf for reforms, and definitely reduce the possibilities of protectionism that is actually creating more distortions over here. And this would help you retain as many investment projects, but also save as many jobs. Soon after, almost in parallel, you need to revise, reform, and promote revised strategies, as already mentioned before. Reform, which is you advocating so that reform can happen. And in this particular context, the agency also itself reforming, as was mentioned. Last but not least, promote proactively like never before. Like virtually, you need to be out there promoting your location. But let's make sense to what you're saying to these investors. Let's also dig in, do it with good information. All right, so what we offer is support on policy and promotion around the investment lifecycle with analytics, advisory, and lending. And don't want to go too much into that. We can, if you're interested, we can talk directly or through your country office of the World Bank Group. There's many publications over the last few months, 6 on investment promotion, including the joint report with WAIPA. And I do invite you to access the interactive link, which is at WAIPA's website and is in this presentation. You just click and go. Every report also has a link for you to look at. And this is only for promotion. We got many other documents that we have published recently on policy, because you cannot be in the limbo, right? You are operating in an investment policy environment. All right, so last but not least, let me thank in particular Boston and WAIPA as a partner of this report and of other initiatives that we're launching together. And thank you to all of you who participated in the last survey that I mentioned. And please do continue to provide and spend some time in these surveys, because it's very important for us to actually advocate on your behalf on why IPAs are important. Thank you very much. Over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Armando, from the World Bank Group. Next, we have Juan Pablo Alcantar. Juan Pablo is the current Vice Chair of the International Advisory Committee at the International Economic Development Council in Washington, D.C. He was the head FDI consultant for Senko Company Limited, a Japanese multinational expanding into Latin America. He served as Director for Economic Development at the Port of Tuxpan in Mexico and Director of Multinational Business Organization in the United States. He was an analyst at the White House Business Council in Washington, D.C., and has participated in advisory councils and board advisory committees for the Federal Reserve Bank 11th District, Frost Bank, federal agencies, and the city of San Antonio and Houston. He currently collaborates with international development banks and organizations, as well as Centers for International Development, regarding investment promotion and economic development. Welcome.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you everybody for sticking with us. So what I want to do is that I was looking at the presentations the other speakers were sending last night, and I realized we have redundant data. We have the same data from different sources. We also do surveys in the Economic Development Council, and I realized that I needed to shift my presentation a little bit. So I'm going to try to add extra perspectives to this presentation so you can get a more integral perspective of FDI and also IPA trends for Latin America. Again, here. So here we have some key points to use as context. Now, greenfield projects and mergings and acquisitions are down significantly. There is major disruption in supply chains and the site selection process modernizing. I wouldn't say changing, I would just say modernizing, because COVID-19 did not actually dramatically change things. It just accelerated trends that we were already seeing. I use this time to present those trends. One of the conversations that we were having with some executives, they were saying that robots don't get sick. So digitization and automation will continue to accelerate. So we have to remember, give me 1 second here. So we have to remember, or we need to actually be aware that remote and virtual working are now part of our new reality. So the real estate industry will continue to change. Retail, commercial, and office spaces will experience dramatic changes. Some say even fatal changes to some companies, which we were already seeing previous to COVID-19 due to commerce and trends in change. But now COVID-19 will actually accelerate these trends. The consumer has shifted and will impact all industries. And these we need to be aware of, because every single industry will have to shift and will have to adapt to the new reality when it comes to or regards consumer demand. So there's also a positive trend for knowledge-intensive jobs, and attraction will continue to play a major role here. However, the inequality gap may increase. Workforce is now more important than ever, especially because the more we make and the more that we do virtual or remote work, we're going to need a workforce that is prepared, better skilled also, and also that has access to infrastructure like fiber optic cable. So this will create an inequality gap that we need to be addressing, that we need to actually lobby, that we need to actually make sure that authorities are paying attention to this. And also the nearshoring pretty much is now a compromise strategy to reshoring. So do not underestimate also the elasticity of commodities. They could be driving shifts in FDI, and I can use an example here. Recently, Elon Musk from Tesla just announced that they're building a new generation electric vehicle that is cheaper and that also lasts longer on the road. And this is basically as a result that some of the raw materials that they were using, car batteries, are subject to price fluctuations. So the price elasticity of commodities is very important, because these price fluctuations may actually change the way we actually, the way these companies actually build their products, so they can make them cheaper, they can differently. And now that vehicles that previously Tesla were considered luxury vehicles now be more accessible, how will this change the rest of the automotive industry that still depends on fuels? And this will eventually affect also the energy industry. So warehousing here will experience exponential growth. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So a few things, I'm using FDI markets here. So how has FDI changed? It's going to be the first half of 2020 compared to the first half of 2019. For Latin America and the Caribbean, it has actually decreased by 51%. And so when it comes to number of projects, from 975 projects for Latin America and the Caribbean, the first half of last year to 407. I'm not going to touch on the other because we're right now focusing on the Latin American Caribbean. Oh, it's also worth mentioning that North America is seeing a decrease of 20% for the first half of this year. And this is one of the things that I'm using DCI here, Development Council's international data, and also their, actually no, this is the AT Kearney Foreign Direct Confidence Index. And I'm using the 2019 because the 2020 was being done while the pandemic was unfolding. So they were seeing the shifts in data. So as the pandemic grew larger, the responses started to change. So they did not go ahead with the full report. So here we start to see what types of cities are mainly our FDI projects are actually looking for. So person management, they were really focused on mega cities, but we're now starting to see trends where an acceleration of trends that they're now looking towards smaller cities, still large cities, because they need talent and they need to look at other factors, but they're looking at smaller, medium-sized cities, large cities as well. So this may actually be a trend that changes or shifts from mega city to smaller size, 1 million people. Also, production manufacturing are still focusing on large cities, but they may actually look forward to moving to the suburbs when it comes to reshoring or nearshoring. Distribution and logistics, sales, research and development. So which areas of the cities? Some we were focusing on the urban core or city center. For example, you go to San Francisco, you get to have the tech companies within the urban core. You get the financial sectors in New York, which now you start to see other financial companies just staying in the locations that they are at, instead of following the herd movement of all these companies focusing on one specific region of a country. Also, one of the things that we have to understand is that for most investors, countries are not the starting point in decisions. So I'm gonna get to this one. So 59% of investors start their foreign direct investment assessment at region or city level. Some actually look for, suppose that you were to ask Mark Zuckerberg, where do you want to base Facebook at? They're not going to say United States first. They're going to say, I'm going to go tech hub or San Francisco. So they're starting to look for, and this is where I have to, that we actually need to look at subnational IPAs too. Not just regional ones, but ones from cities, because they are important key factors in driving foreign direct investment, especially when it comes to site selection process. Here. So almost 2/3 of the companies are engaging more with city level stakeholders. 64% of investors say that they are significantly more local engagement. This is part of the localism trend that we're starting to see. So most of these companies are actually engaging more with the city. What does this mean? This means support for academic institutions, new research and development programs with academic institutions. We start to see workforce development, interns to develop skills with the community, and also participation in, let's say, crisis response. They start to look more at websites looking for specific data on how to respond to COVID and the pandemic. So the interactions actually supporting, funding in different organizations at the community level. So this is very good, because that means that for process of aftercare and retention and expansion, subnational IPAs have an important role developing and strengthening these relationships from which they can draw on for larger investments. One of the variables that I did not want to leave out that right now COVID-19 is pushing out is the fact of the climate change. On the 2020 AT Kearney Foreign Direct Investment Index report, they have that 60% of investors expect financial loss in the next 3 years due to climate change. What does this mean? Suppose that you're in an area of South Asia that was hit by the tsunamis, or recently in an area of Houston that was hit by a big storm. One of the gas companies actually stayed closed for up to 3 months. Can you imagine a corporate shut down, or a company or a plant shut down by 3 months just because of a natural disaster? The wires in California, earthquakes also. So climate change starting to become a big factor. We saw also a trend on the past decade of trucking that was actually stopping natural disasters. How did Hurricane Harvey affect in Houston? Pretty much stopped activities in headquarters and accelerated remote work too. And so other top factors in investment decisions that reinforce dominance of developed markets, and Armando was a little bit about this, is that the new rankings, these are for last year, which should a little bit with COVID-19 for 2020. However, that report will not come out until next year. So example, tax rates, many of these factors are actually governance and regulatory factors that at the national level, not so much at the local level. However, that we need to pay attention to. For example, government incentives for investors. If you were to ask a corporate executive what first things they look for on a website, it's very different from site selectors. Selectors would tell you that they're looking at corporate incentives to attract investment. But if we learn something from the Amazon bid or request for proposals for the location for their headquarters, is that they started to look, they received over 200 proposals, they narrowed it down to 20, and they kept on narrowing it down. But at the end of the day, they already set a few locations that they wanted to work with. So they started to play one location against the other location to get more and more and more incentives. And this actually backfired and had a backlash with the city, because offering $1 billion for a company that was gonna add to gentrification, and it did not play well. So they ended up having to change this. So if you were to talk to executives, I'm pretty sure that they would look for different things. Most of this related to labor and skills. And here the talent attraction is very important. So on your websites, you do need to have your insights. You need to learn when maybe a site selector or a consultant may be playing your community against another community. I personally had an example in which that actually applied. We're gonna shift, but the macroeconomic environment and the political and the stability, economic stability of a region is so important, and corporate executives are actually answering to these factors. So stability in a developed market, also geopolitical problems. For example, you have trade wars with China, U.S. trade war, U.S.-China trade wars. You also have the rise of populism in Europe and Latin America, which is changing more towards a nationalistic views, pretty much close some loopholes, some windows for foreign direct investment. So those are factors that we need to look for. And if you're an IPA in a country where you start to see these trends, don't be afraid. Don't run from the fact that you are experiencing a closing doors in foreign direct investment. Actually be straight up with your investment. Yes, we are actually experiencing, for example, Mexico, a close on the energy sector. However, the other industries are still open for investment. And if you're an IPA in this country, you still need to focus on areas that you can manage. Maybe you're not there anymore for the energy industry, but you can be there for other industries as well. Don't be afraid to talk to your leads or your prospects about the issues, as well as what you're doing to solve them. And this, I just recently added it right now because Jaime was actually talking about it, and I'm using this slide from Kenneth Smith, actually, and Pro Newmark and Agon, which is according to UNCTAD, with an analysis ability, just a decrease in 2% of trade between China and North America. You get to see this specific impact. So you get the automotive, the communications equipment. See, I have questions here. Okay, so no, it's just something for later. So this is not going to be on my presentation when I send them via email. I just added it to respond to one of his comments that he had. So what were the impacts and which industry affected? So if you are an IPA, you want to look at this data specifically. How much money is there? Companies might be there. And this may relate to trade agreements, but they may also relate to actually rules of origins embedded in them that may cause reshoring or nearshoring. This is also an opportunity for you. Housing, we have that, and this also I took from Agon and Kenneth Smith, and so that we're moving, we're seeing a trend that because of COVID-19, the just in time to the just in case. So if we have a 5% increase on inventory just to maintain operations going in case of another pandemic, in case of a natural disaster, you're pretty much, for regards to Mexico, you're pretty much doubling or adding the demand, doubling the demand for housing space in Mexico. So this is a huge opportunity for investors in warehousing that you can attract. So this shift in increasing inventory just to make sure that you can maintain operations in case of a disaster or a pandemic actually gives you an opportunity here in warehousing too. And I wanted to say I'm using DCI Winning Strategies 2017 because actually the 2020 should be out in a few months, but the 2017 tells us of previous trends that we were already seeing. In regards to leading sources of information that influence executive perceptions of business climate comparison, we start to see different issues. For example, here when it regards to social media, that was not a factor and currently it's a big factor. But look at online sources. From 1996 to 17, it has been increasing. The dialogue with industry peers, it still remains as the #1 source of influencing executive perceptions. Now, this takes us back to the fact that we need to focus on business retention and expansion on aftercare, because those industries in your city, in your region, are actually ambassadors of your community. They help you actually businesses, and many of them will actually receive corporate executives from other companies before they come as an IPA or as an economic development organization. I'll move here, and this is a very interesting poll right from Atlas Integrated. The fact is that you see your country or your community from a street level based from your perception, but site selectors see you in a comparative context. And regards to IEDC and the work we're doing in Latin America is that we look at your websites, we look at LinkedIn page, we send you emails and chat, we chat on you on the chat box. Not just the time issue because the response rate is very slow. However, with Cinde or Invest Chile, which they are actually fast, or other IPAs. But what we're not seeing is narrative context here. We're not seeing those shift share analyses, those input-output analysis, the location coefficients. We're not seeing, or quotients, seeing them to use the comparison between a specific industry and the competing community in your region or within your country with regards to this industry. GIS is also becoming very, very important. You need to use maps with various layers, structure, transportation, zoning, and here subnational and IPAs may become more important, specifically because of the fact that they are there to actually get the zoning. They can actually talk to the landowners and the industrial parks and make sure that the database that works. However, because of budget constraints, they may need work better with the regional or national IPAs. And I'm going to use an example. If you have the time, please take a look at this website. There's many websites can be comparisons. To us in IEDC, this was the 2019 award winner for best website regards to investment promotion. And look at the site select. Look at the sites. So go to this website underneath here and look at it. Please play around with this. Play around and see how they used every single data necessary for a site selector or a corporate executive to actually look at a region without having to be there. You get Dusseldorf, you get London, you also get the Netherlands, who have really good websites, but also this is a state IPA or EDO actually, but that do investment promotion. And this is also how competitive regional or local or state IPAs get if they actually put their minds into it, if they know how to do it, and if they work with international organizations to continue to modernize the way they do investment. So please look at it, play around with every single tab and every single tool here so you can see how they actually plan entire data to attract investors. For us at IEDC, we actually have IEDC data sets, and we use this is pretty much a template for one of the websites. I'm not going to spend money on it because of the time, but one of the trends is that the visual and online is important, but getting users to the information they need is a priority. I have several of your websites. They actually look beautiful, but I'm still having trouble, and I go to several interfaces to get to the data that I need. If I was a site selector or a corporate executive, it is still challenging for me to actually get the information that I need. So our recommendations are, not just Anna, but Jaime and Armando actually talked about this, is we narrow the mandates. If you're a government authority here that oversees how your local IPA or your IPA works, please push for narrowing mandates and target specific industries. I remember when ProMexico was active, I could get pretty much reports on every industry on their website. However, with regards to specific workforce data and current data, it was pretty much outdated. It was 4 years outdated, and they were all over. So that old premise of saying, shoot everything that flies and catch everything that falls, it's no longer applicable to these times. We need to go towards for specific target industries. Don't try to be all things to all people. So we also recommend that you connect, if you're a national IPA, that you connect and collaborate with subnational IPAs and EOs, or do what the Caribbean did with CAIPA. They pretty much join on efforts of investment promotion and export promotion, and they are being very effective at it. Go digital, go virtual, use GIS technology, work on your website. It is not just about putting information there, but it is actually about engaging your prospects, your leads, and developing those relationships. Really draw them into a conversation, draw them into a Zoom meeting, and try to. Now, these websites allow you to get in contact with your leads and your prospects much faster than the process. They used to, once they narrow the location down to maybe 20 prospects, that's when they contacted a local IPA or EDO. But your website now allows you to see when those clients, when those prospects, when those leads are actually engaging with your website. And now you start to follow, who are they? What are they looking for on my website? So I can adapt my website to their needs. And there's a few European countries that are actually doing this very well. This is actually called, and Anna, I think is here. She's here, and I saw from one of her courses also the filtering bubble, subject here that applies also as well. Virtual reality, CRM, chat box, video, tailored services depending on who the investor, what they're looking for, and others. You need to look at new technology and how it applies to your IPA. So research and include comparative data. This is very, very important for EDOs, but it should be also important for location quotient, for actually IPAs. Site selectors look for location quotients, and if they can get the information without them having to do it, pretty much is a self-serve service. You need to look at how your community compares to other community with regards to course, with regards to skills, or with regards to a specific industry. So these types of analysis are very useful in websites, and we're not seeing that as much as we would like in American IPAs. Also, aftercare, business retention and expansion, which Amanda portrayed it, is that we're not doing enough of it. Our budgets are pretty much located on investment, actually outreach, and not so much on business retention and expansion. Yet the current crisis pushes us to focus more on business retention and expansion, because reinvestments are going to be part of the foreign direct investment for the coming years. So restructure your 21 budget to meet the challenges of the new reality based on the data that is being portrayed here, but also continue investing in staff training and certifications. It is very important that you classify some of your budget to fund training and certifications for your staff. And one of these is going to be the certification for continuity professionals. So you can actually use your data for emergencies. And this is what pretty much looks like. So this is the British Airways case for Brazil, and it increased expanding investments once they settled in 1996. How they continue to expand these types of services. And this is the type of model that you're looking when you're doing aftercare and business retention and expansion. In regards to IEDC, I'm almost done here. So we have relevant publications, and this is the Economic Development Research Partners. It's part of the research branch that we have for at the IEDC. We have a new standard, which is achieving data excellent economic development. So economic development organizations also do investment promotion. And this slide here that is on our bookstore available and on our website, it's very useful to how to use data, especially that shift share analysis, input output analysis, locations, how to portray them on your website too. Incentives for the 21st century, what other types of incentives are available that are not necessarily monetary and that corporate executives are actually looking for too. We have other studies as well here, and we have our EDRP leaders, which are specific reports that came out of the COVID crisis based on what we have been doing, and also a study on how EDOs add value through business retention and expansion. If your IPA is not working well and if it's not performing to standard, this is also a good study and get some insights. We do training courses. We have the certification for economic developers and the accreditation of economic development offices. For example, Mexico, majority of investment promotions, once ProMexico was closed, now fell on economic organizations. And we started to see a few regional IPAs come up, and we're actually very excited about it. But so far, economic development organizations in many countries handle the bulk of the investment promotion at a regional or local. So here we have courses that you can take. They are now online and they come with their own manuals. It's not just the presentation, have the manuals in which you can review them and then get certified as an economic developer, or have your office or department as an economic developer organization. And the last but not least is the disaster preparation. We have our own site. It's restoreyoureconomy.org. It's updated by the Economic Development Council and funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration. And here you also have some links that will take you to the Certified Business Continuity Professional. If your IPA was focused on having a response to COVID-19 and communicating with your investors, you should have a certified business continuity professional within your organization. And they can access data, they can access formats that are very useful for investors when it comes to emergency management due to natural disasters or other type of disasters. At this site, you also get, if you do not have a website for COVID-19, at this site, you can get a template for a 19 website, how it should look, how it will actually, what type of elements, types of websites. You can get it from here if you don't have the budget to actually develop a brand new website. So also you get case studies, publications, and reports from different organizations, not just IEDC. You get tools and impact surveys. If you haven't been doing impact surveys, you can get a full template that you can send via email or actually via MailChimp or Constant Contact. You also get useful links and disaster, also crisis communications, how your IPA should be communicating during this crisis. And why? Because you need to add risk profile to your proposition. Many of the possible disasters that you can get that many businesses did not take into account. And evidence of this is the Winning Strategies 2020 survey that actually started within the first months of the year when the pandemic was just starting. And as soon as it started to develop towards March, responses totally changed. So that means corporate executives were not ready for these changes. Because they were not ready, the impact was much higher. So your certified continuity business professional actually helps businesses guide and give them tool data and work with their emergency planning or plans to know how to respond to these types of instances. You don't have to spend time. It will be sent on the email to everyone who registered for this campaign. So that's my part of my presentation, and I thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pablo. And unfortunately, we have run over time. So again, I do want to let everyone know that a full recording of this will be sent out afterwards. Our next speaker is Bastian Scholar. Bastian Scholar is currently serving as an executive director for the CEO of the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies. WAIPA is the umbrella organization of worldwide investment promotion agencies established in 1995 in Geneva under auspices of UNCTAD. Previously, he served as a director of the new Slovenian Public Agency for Promotion of Investment, Internationalization, Entrepreneurship, and Tourism. Under a mandate from the government, he successfully merged together agencies for investment and internationalization, tourism and technology, and optimized organizational, employment, and financial structure in the new agency. He also served 4 years as a consul for economic affairs of Slovenia in Istanbul, Turkey. He has also effectively performed his international business and market development activities and managing roles of various companies in the textile, automobile, printing, and construction sectors in many foreign countries such as Denmark, Sweden, Switzerland, France, and Turkey. He has served over 20 years of management experience and is one of the global leaders in investment promotion area with a private sector focus. His vast experience in different roles from private to public sector give him a global overview on current business and geopolitical trends that influences the flows of FDI. Thank you so much for being with us, Bastian.
Thank you so much, Emily. I will try to be very brief because obviously we are out of time totally of the webinar. So I guess there is a better opportunity that at least some questions and answers shall be given, opportunity to the listeners. I will not say anything about WAIPA. You can check our webpage. So what we are doing, how did we assist IPAs as a, let's say, global organization. I would just like to thank to all my colleagues that gave excellent presentations, and especially Armando, which presented our common global IPA survey. And I must say that out of all speakers, 3 are in our consultative committee board, that we use their extensive knowledges. So what we heard is that Latin America is not any different than other parts of the world and was also hit severely by the pandemic. I will not go into numbers because we heard from previous speakers, but definitely we can say that the region of Latin America and Caribbean, also due to the structural vulnerabilities and some political uncertainty, is also maybe even more exposed to the shocks. IPAs are everywhere in the world, more or less giving us the same answers. So in our special COVID survey, we realized that 98% of IPAs are some way impacted by the virus, and 75% says that this was high or very high impact. So this means that what we heard from the colleagues before, they need to change their view, change their approaches, revisit their strategies. I would just mention something additional to what Armando was presenting from our common survey was the most common changes anticipated by IPAs. Was the impact of digitalization and technology disruptions, 56%, changes in the markets, new investment promotion methods, policy and regulatory changes, and global and trade uncertainty. I must say, I guess Armando didn't say that this survey was done even prior to COVID. So we added the COVID surveys we did separately into our report. So what I want to say with this is that the negative trends were shown even before the COVID pandemic. So the pandemic was just, I would say, additionally affecting the situation. So as I said, I will just shortly mention which sectors. I think we didn't say which sectors was the most affected. So it was also, according to World Bank's survey, was hotels and restaurants, 88%, travel, tourism services, 56%, and the wholesale and retail, 41%. So IPAs anticipate the least affected segments. On the other hand, it was information technology, telecommunications equipment, computer and software services, telecommunications, media, entertainment, of course, pharmaceutical, biotechnology. So this can be used as an opportunity. So what IPAs we heard already should focus on: digitalization, recovery, let's say post-COVID, digital competitiveness will be the key. So investment into ICT is crucial. So the long-term investments are also an enabler for many different sectors of the economy to increase prosperity, for example, the healthcare. So the digital tools should be considered. Bylaws should be checked if the particular country is able to implement the digital tools. We heard already that from the common survey that policy advocacy and the aftercare are not enough represented in the activities of IPAs. And we also heard that they have too many mandates that they need to focus. But obviously, during these extraordinary times, the aftercare and the policy advocacy should be even more focused on. Of course, IPAs, we all know they are intermediate bodies between the investors and the governments. And of course, on one hand, they are trying to assist the existing investors in their countries, trying to mitigate their challenges and to mitigate their risks. We all know that 50 to 60% of the new investment comes from the existing investors. So that's why policy advocacy and aftercare is a very important act. Strategies, we heard there before that, and we also gave as WAIPA, according to our survey that we did, what we recommend to IPAs was rethinking investment promotion strategy and channels to be used for promotion. Also revisiting the organizational structure of the agency and potentially budget allocation. Reprioritization of target sectors, also harvesting innovations and startups as potential groups, strengthening connections with the local ecosystem, so SMEs and existing investors, implementing cost-efficient targeted image building campaigns, digital transformation and strengthening of existing digital investment promotion practices. What we believe are the main trends that are currently valid is, of course, COVID-19, as mentioned already, and definitely this pandemic will drive MNEs to consider options to achieve greater supply chain resilience and could lead to a policy push for a higher degree of national or regional self-sufficiency in the production of critical supplies, which may also extend to broader strategic industrial capacity. So the trends toward rationalization of international operations, and we heard reshoring, nearshoring, or regionalization looks likely to accelerate. Technology trends, as I already mentioned, so the application of new technologies in the supply chains of global MNEs has far-reaching consequences for the configuration of international production networks. So this has already raised important concerns for policymakers with the realization that growth will depend on promoting investment in new sectors that I already mentioned before. So in today's digital world, reaching global markets that does not require investments that include heavy assets. So international production is shifting towards intangibles like royalties, licensing fees, and light forms of assets. Global economic governance trends, fragmentation, international economic policy making, and especially in trade and investment policy, is reflected in a shift away from multilateral cooperation towards regional in bilateral solutions and increased protectionism. Sustainable development trends. So the implementation of broad range of sustainability measures, including climate change, adaptation and mitigation measures in the global operations of MNEs and differential speeds in the adoption and implementation of rules, regulations and practices aimed at sustainability will definitely have important implications for international production networks. So the need to channel investments into Sustainable Development Goals project, which should be, of course, bankable, is crucial. So we made a short survey that we saw that 56% of IPAs believe that there will be, of course, budget cuts because the governments are putting a lot of assets towards recovery of their economies. 22% believe that they might lose some authority, at least at certain level. And what is shocking information was that 8% of them are even considering that there can be a total closure of the agency. But on the other hand, we as an umbrella organization, we believe that this is exactly opposite. And we are advocating as well, of course. We heard from OECD, we heard from World Bank and the other institution, IEDC as well. We heard that IPAs are more than ever needed. So they need to step up the game. They need to check what services they are offering. They need to revisit their strategy. They need to go into more lean organizations. They need to attract new talents because we heard new sectors are emerging. So looks like that IPAs are not ready for the new sectors or new technologies because normally we know that IPAs has a sector specialist in their structures. So a talent search is one of the very important issues. Of course, capacity building, getting new skills, but of course, having it budgets ready that can be used for capacity building. And we as WAIPA, we are providing a lot of training and services, and we heard from other colleagues before that they are as well doing it, but IPAs and their governments should be aware of this and should also allocate some certain budget for these things. I would say at the end, not to be too long, that I believe that all colleagues that were speaking before me, and as well, we have another colleagues from International Chamber of Commerce, as well, International Labor Organization, and from UNCTAD in our consultative board. We will firmly stand behind the IPAs. We will advocate in their behalf towards their governments instead of thinking about let's say, decreasing their budgets or their authorities, to be putting them even in a more forefront of the not just investment promotion, but also policy advocacy, to be able to assist the governments and investors to overcome this pandemic negative impact and to further work on the investment promotion and attraction and the whole life cycle, of course. So I would stop here, and I guess it's better to give some opportunity to listeners as well to ask some questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bastian. We have some questions that we have collected from the audience. We have over 35 countries represented here in the audience today. So first I'd like to, but given where we are with time, I am going to kind of close out and then ask those of the speakers who can stay that we'd like to do a couple of the questions with the group. So I just want to start by thanking all of the speakers that joined us today and for their very dynamic presentations. The purpose of this was to really show the different perspectives that are in this space with the purpose of alignment. Thank you so much to WAIPA, to Bastian Scholar, to Andreas Hora, Ahmed, Oric, all from WAIPA, for really leading the organization of this event. Thank you to other collaborators and marketing sponsors, Research FDI, Conway, ROI Research on Investment, and Gazelle AI, BMT Global Consulting, and Invest Monterey. You all really helped, to bring this event together. Thank you so much. Now I would like to bring in a couple questions from the audience to our speakers.
Emily, I don't know if you want, I can answer. It's true that it's late. But if you want, I can answer the Christian Rodriguez question.
That would be wonderful, yes.
Okay, it's an excellent question. Christian's excellent question, and nice to see you like in this means. I think that the question is that if after COVID, we will be really in a situation that will be a protectionist situation. And what we have seen right now is that there are a lot of investment facilitation. Countries want to attract more FDI. I don't see like a strong protectionist mood, but you're completely right that many countries are implementing this FDI screening mechanism. And as you are aware, at the OECD, we are following this kind of movement. And then we did policy note that is in my presentation, how this is not new. It was before since 2016, but it's really accelerated. And now the EU had a regulation in May that is encouraging other EU countries to have this kind of mechanism. The issue is how you manage the real threat that are there, or the countries believe that are there, with keeping market opens. And we are working with these countries. If IPAs need to get engaged on that, I would say that without doubt, if you're in a country that have this kind of mechanism, you need to be part of the policy advocacy and investment facilitation rules in this kind of application of the FDI mechanism. That means that yes, but of course they are not the actors, because the actors here are national security, that sometimes are in different parts of the government, in the trade, in the finance, that are leading with this kind of mechanism. But I think that countries are trying to apply them in a transparent way, in a proportional way, because they believe that FDIs are good for them. That means that it's a kind of how to balance. I hope that I answered to you, and if not, we can have a bilateral conversation, Christine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anna. Another question from our audience is really just getting specific about how can an IPA or government authority access or request your services, and what would that collaboration look like with your organization?
Emily, let me take that one. This is Jaime from the IDB. We are a financial organization, and usually any kind of initiative has to enter via the ministers of finance of the countries. They are the governors of the IDB, and therefore it's via the office of the finance minister that communicates with the local office of the IDB in every capital. We have presence in every capital in Latin America and the Caribbean, in every member country. So it's via those channels that these kind of issues should be handled, because they are the ones that make the programming every year. They are the ones that allocate the different resources that we devote. And so if there is any question regarding this, please send me an email and I will be happy to provide you with further information. I think you guys here in the organizational setting can provide everybody with our emails so that they can contact us at any given moment. Thank you.
Same here. This is Armando Heilbron, and you can contact the country office for the World Bank Group in your country, or you can send me an email. I think you're going to get our emails in the distribution of the presentations. Answering to some of the questions, if I may, I think definitely competition is going to be really fierce. And that's why the further data, the analysis that we all suggested, so that you can fine tune your value proposition, really get to compelling value propositions to be contacting these investors one way or the other. M&A, mergers and acquisitions, will be hot topic. Not now, as we saw, and we continue to see declines there while the uncertainty is high, but we foresee that this is going to come hot. Like in previous recessions or global crisis, you have some assets in distress, and this is where opportunistic investors may come in. So IPAs may also think about modes of investment, not just greenfield, because they are not coming as many as we already discussed, but the brownfield. In our report, the one that I mentioned, the Global Investment Competitiveness Report, we have a chapter precisely on the benefits of brownfield, that we all think that maybe it's not the ideal scenario, but it does have some benefits. So I strongly encourage you to look at that M&A as possibilities. For instance, hotel assets may be for a target. Other modalities, joint ventures, and even technology agreements. What if there is a data center investment? You may want to have the connections with the big players in data center and what it takes to really become a player in this very, very lucrative business right now. The policy restrictions that Christian alluded to, Absolutely. We're seeing a lot of that because of nationalistic and trying to take care of our own, but then you're missing out on that very important piston of the economy, which is foreign investment and foreign markets. And as you restrict your markets and you restrict investment, you are shooting yourself in the foot. And this is where the IPA comes to the rescue, advocating for, hey, look, we're actually making or doing a disservice to us. IPAs more than ever need to advocate for what is right. And I'm sure we all have great examples of where the government and the Assembly, Congress is making some decisions which are contrary to that picture. Last but not least, Emmanuel asked about OEMs and bringing their suppliers as a pack. We have seen this in the past, and even from one industry, which we all know, automotive, bringing the suppliers together and be co-located. Electronics behaves certainly as that way, appliances and electronic or consumer electronics. But very interesting, we also recommend you see the case study of PVH. It's a apparel textile company, well known for their brands. But then in Ethiopia, they did a very new model. They decided to come with 15 suppliers. And we wrote a case study on that. So you can Google it and check PVH, PV as in Vector H in Ethiopia. And you can see how that model may start get some traction in other sectors of the economy. Back to you guys.
I would also add that, for example, IEDC, you just pretty much connect with us on the website, add me on LinkedIn or send me an email as soon as the presentations are, you receive the presentations now. So that's an easy, quick way to get in contact. I will more than likely request probably a call or a Zoom meeting just to evaluate what your needs may be and then make a recommendation. But I do recommend looking for professional development. WAIPA has excellent and actually high-level courses that they have been developing that with regards to investment promotion agencies. Also, IDB has many online courses that you can take, and I know the Ana Arias from the IDB and Jaime have been working on these courses that you can take online with regards to investment promotion. These you can get from pretty much all the organizations here present. You can get them. But if you are an IPA, I recommend that you sign up with WAIPA, because they are actually, their main focus is the IPA. So sign up, it's a membership organization, just like IEDC is. And if you're an economic development organization, sign up with us as well. We don't actually compete, we actually work well together. We have a webinar tomorrow, actually, we have to be present, so we collaborate often. But we're not strangers, we're not rivals, we collaborate very well.
This was the best ever promotion for WAIPA, actually. So I thank you to Juan. And yes, of course, I would like to welcome any of IPA or even EDO to get in touch with us. Of course, the communication channels are open, either emails to my colleagues or via website. You can follow what we are doing. And that's why I said before, the easiest way is to check on the website. We are of course, in membership-driven organization. So we try to do everything possible to exchange best practices, to provide you the different capacity buildings. So anything that you need, we try to advocate as well on your behalf. So please feel free to reach out to us and to read all the reports that are on our webpage. Especially, I should as well promote that what we did together with World Bank Group. And I really believe that it's worth to read this report, although it's extensive, but it's unique in a couple of years in a global level. And as we have as well OECD here and the other colleagues, I guess the future should be that we should not duplicate these surveys and reports, but we should work on a global level hand in hand. So this was a very public call to other institutions as well. And I believe we are in a good way to work together and for a common benefit of all FDI community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all the esteemed panelists, Bastian, Armando, Ana, Jaime, Juan Pablo. And this is an incredibly substantive conversation about really important collaboration that needs to happen. And I hope that all of our guests from around the world, thank you so much for spending this morning with us, or evening, depending on where you're coming from. We hope that you really have seen some opportunities to get involved with these organizations. Again, we'll be following up with all the links from the presentations and the resources that the speakers mentioned. And I would just like to close out again by thanking WAIPA Research, FDI, Conway, ROI Research on Consulting, ROI Research on Investment and Gazelle AI, BMT Global Consulting, and Invest Monterrey. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay in touch.